Hello and welcome to the Book by Book, a podcast about the odd book or two you've read. I'm your host Scott and I'm not alone. Toby's here too. This episode we're talking about Dagon by H.P Lovecraft. It's going to be a fairly spoiler heavy episode, so if that's okay with you, continue on and I'll see you on the other side.
Gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast by the Book by Book, brought to you from the Dogearedpagecafe.
Nice. It's funny, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they've been going for years and they're still like, hey listener, I'm Scott from the Book by Book, and they introduce themselves and the podcast. I mean we have the intro, but I don't think we do it live.
No, we don't really have I suppose the intro's kind of like
we're more cash.
Yeah.
More like talk audio.
Yes, indeed we are. Exactly that. So, what were we talking about before we come on air? My date.
Just you had a late one because you're on a date.
Yes, I got back about 1:30 last night, so a bit groggy, a bit hungover. Something that doesn't often happen to me. Not that coming back late, but being hungover because I just don't drink that often. For those that don't know, but yeah, last night found myself in a wine bar at sort of 11:30, 12.
Swanky.
While they were literally kicking people out the door because they were too drunk and it was closing. Just watching somebody launched through the door at the end of the thing. But yeah, it was very swanky. I've never been in a wine bar before, and this was like bottles of wine on almost like vending machine type thing. You press a button, choose your size, beep your card, and then press a button and it would fill your glass.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Really posh. And quite expensive. Like £8-9 a glass. You're like, what the frickin' Jesus?
That's not too bad for good wine.
Yeah, it's a glass of wine though. It's a glass. It's not the bottle.
Yeah, but you get smashed on like 3 or 4.
I suppose I did. Yeah, it's true.
But for wine,
but
anyway.
Yeah, and it was very good wine. To be perfectly honest with you, I was impressed. I don't normally drink wine or like wine, but I came away thinking, you know what, I could go there again. And
I've picked up another expensive habit.
Yeah, darn it. But yeah, so it was good. We had a really nice evening. We went to a board game place. Have you heard of these board game cafes?
Yeah, I've been. It's been a while actually, and did we talk about this recently? Where I wish I had more friends who I could take. Have more fun as a group. But me and my partner go once in a while, although it has been a while. They're really fun. You just get to try games that normally cost a lot of money.
Yes,
and sometimes
indeed.
Not that good. So you're glad you didn't buy it. They look pretty. Ooh, this game looks pretty. I want to buy it. No, it's not that good.
Great. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, this was my first experience of one of those cafes. There's one that opened in Birmingham in the custard factory section. And it was really, really good. Extremely busy. There's lots of people in there playing games and drinking coffee and having cocktails and eating cake. And this is where we met up for the date. I arrived on time.
Nice.
She, on the other hand, was over 40 minutes late.
Ooh.
I was kind of sat there with like a sticking out like a sore thumb, trying to play board games by myself. Just reading the instruction booklets. Yeah. Patience, that's what I say.
I'm going to master the game and kick her ass when she gets here.
I wasn't playing Patience, but I showed Patience, let's put it that way.
Were you confident she was going to show, or was it like, oh God,
I've been ghosted in the ultimate way. Yeah. No.
What are your best one-player games?
Yeah. Anybody want to come and sit with me? But no, she did turn up 40 minutes late, and it was a legitimate mistake on her part. And I picked up on the fact that she's a stickler for being on time earlier on in the first few dates I've been on with her. And for her not to be on time, I was like quite surprised because I panicked because I ended up getting a bus in because I'd left it too late to get the train in. And then the bus got held up by this sort of police cordon thing and had to do this huge turnaround, elaborate move to get out of where it was stuck, then find an alternate route. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. Bang on 4 o'clock, I arrived at the entrance. It's like, get in, have it.
Covered in sweat, covered in mud.
Yeah.
Brand new sneakers, wrecked.
Exactly that. 40 minutes later, she turns up.
No.
I was like,
It happens.
It does. I've got no problem.
Like she hasn't made a habit of it, which is the silver lining, right?
Yeah. And she was most flustered and apologetic, so that was fine. So we played a couple of board games. That was really good.
What did you play?
Oh, I can't remember the names. We played Mantis, which is like a card game by the same people that made Exploding Kittens and things like that. That was very good. She really enjoyed that because she won. And we played Code Names.
Okay.
Quite a famous one. Lots of people played that. That was good. I won. Well, that was a 2-player.
You know what? I don't know what I'm thinking of. Like, it's called Werewolf or Spy, but that's like that has to be more than 2 because it's like figuring out who's lying. I'm not sure
this was so just a 2-player. Guess you've got like a load of cards, a 5x5 grid in front of you, and each one has a title or a name on it, and you have to use one word to make your partner pick the right word of that grid 5x5. So if it's a astronaut, you would say moon, and then they would look at all the cards and go, well, moon and astronaut go together, it's going to be astronaut. But if they get it wrong,
okay.
And and then there's this bad character, Mr. X, who's trying to kill you. And then we also
team playing game. Then there's no both win.
There's no winner. So that was great. Then we went for some tapas afterwards in a really good tapas bar.
Oh, that is such a good idea. Tapas. Do you get because you're so new to dating? Do you worry about eating big meals alongside her?
No, I'm not self-conscious
You're not
about
food conscious.
eating food. No,
tacos is such a good place because
the only thing I'm conscious about is the cost of it all. Still trying to get my head around the fact that it's okay to spend £60 on a meal.
But this was the whole night.
Yeah, well, this was not including the wine and everything from the wine bar. So
I mean, I guess it depends if you're hitting the clubs and how far you're taking it. But you are on those early dates where it's like it's all about the not fun activities, but it's all about the carefree.
Yeah, and I'm still struggling with that. It's always been a bit of a thing for me, money. So getting there, working at it.
I guess if you have a mix-up, it's fun to like, and then the next one is like a hike in the woods. You know what I mean? Like mix it up.
Yeah,
you can come around my place and we're making homemade pizza.
Yeah, completely. That's what I hopefully will get more towards that at some point. But she is very good. She's lovely, wonderful woman, very funny. I described her our first date last night as she came across as stoic. She was like, stoic? I was trying to be really soft and kind and floral and lovely, but stoic. Nobody's ever called me stoic before. I was like, hang on a minute. I mean, what does stoic mean to you?
It's not a bad description, but I just think it's an odd one for a romantic date description.
If I'm nothing but if not truthful when I'm drunk.
I'm sure if you put it in a thesaurus, it all comes up with like stony-faced, serious.
Exactly that. And it was the right word. That's what I was meant to be describing her as. But yeah, it was great.
Stick to your guns, eh?
Yeah. Honest, truthful, not going to sugarcoat anything. And I said she softened in the subsequent dates we've had since, and I've gotten to see a bit more of the less stoicness. It's been great.
Still using that word. Yeah. I was going to say softer side. Stoic minus. Toby.
Yes.
We've waffled, and I don't think we're rounding this into the book.
I'm trying to find a segue in, but there isn't really one. What I will say, the story we were going to talk about does talk about, like, goes into mental health and things like that. So you're very good at if you have struggles with this type of thing or are feeling tendencies towards hopelessness, or if you feel there's no way out and the only way out is like our title character, please seek help. There is help out there.
Well,
and actually, here you go. Taking it, a phone call away, and taking it in, literally swinging it back to my date works for BetterHelp. So, get in contact with them if they need any help.
Yes, definitely. Take that shit seriously.
Definitely, 100% agree. So, what are we here to talk about today,
Toby? We are here to talk about. Okay, you had the enunciation issues.
No, I do, and I am going to pronounce.
Here's another one. Dagon.
It is officially Dagon.
That sounds better than Dagon.
Dagon by Howard Phillips, aka H.P. Lovecraft.
Nice. I feel like Dagon sounds like something from Doctor Who. The Dagons are coming.
That's exactly it, and
Dagon
I think it works perfectly. Basically, if you think about the description of the character and everything, he sounds exactly like a Doctor Who character.
Oh no!
Or the bad guy does, or the
Dagon himself.
Deep. The Dagon. Yes.
Toby, there's a
go
bit of an elephant in the room.
Oof.
And I hope you enjoyed this. I'm hoping we can have a bit of a, like, in between our books, maybe like a run on H.P. Lovecraft. But I guess it all depends on if you particularly enjoyed this or disliked it. So it's pretty well recorded in history that H.P. Lovecraft was like an anti-Semitic racist.
He was indeed.
So I guess that we're going to open this. I didn't want to waffle on too much, but where are you on separating the art from the artist? And did you want me to go first?
No, that's fine. I don't think, for me, I don't have a problem with. Well, I do. Obviously, I do have a problem with all of the racism and embedded in it and all that sort of thing. It's fundamentally wrong that we as a society are slowly but not quick enough moving on and becoming more accepting of each other, and it needs to happen faster. But it is also it is an interesting, like, because you can clearly see within Dagon, this story, that there are elements of that going on. I feel some people say that this is probably one of the stories that doesn't have much of that, but I think there is a lot of that.
Interesting. I did find a paragraph where someone was like, if you're a racist and if you can read between the lines, this feels like a brutal description of something.
Yes, indeed. And I would concur to that. There are elements of that for sure, definitely. Like praying to a monolith and all that sort of, that kind of taps into a lot of, I should have gone and done my research, but the pilgrimages that they do in India or where I'm not sure
like deities and stuff like that.
Yeah, where they have that big pillar in the middle of the desert and they all do their praying to it. It kind of feels like that. There's elements of it, like in this story. To me, anyway, that was the sort of connections I made.
Like foreign methods and stuff like that.
Yes. Can I separate that from what I'm reading? Probably because I'm not intelligent enough to understand and see all of that. Then yes, I can gloss over it and I can ignore it and just read it as a story and as a tale. But I haven't read any H.P. Lovecraft other than this story. So I can't tell you how I will feel when I start to read the stories that are very clearly
once we start,
so I may well change my opinion.
Inexcusable clangers.
No, good answer. No, that's great. For me, I think, like in this case, there's a few specifics that so far make me kind of feel okay about consuming it.
Right.
One, he's been dead over 100 years, and other than that, I think it kind of comes down to the personal consumer. Like if you can separate the art from an artist, then sort of good on you, because it just means there's something more out in the world. I think, is it Anokia Okafor? I don't know how to pronounce her name. She's sort of African American maybe writer who wrote Lagoon, and when she won like an award, the statue was of like H.P. Lovecraft's head. And as a black woman, she sort of spoke to another black writer who won it once. And was like, well, how do I, what do you do with this? And she said she sort of settles for just turning him around and making him face the corner, and sort of taking enjoyment that he would sort of hate her having that. But no, if what you've heard about him puts you off, or if there's an artist out there who's said something that puts you off their incomplete material, then so be it. I'm behind you 100%. I think as we go, depending on what kind of becomes evident in the material, is where maybe we start drawing the line. But it is a tricky one to answer. There are certainly, between like film actors, directors, musicians, and novelists, certainly some who I've just quit out on because of the way they have been or said, or something they've done or a belief they've held. But there's also some who I have not agreed with what they said at all, and I've sort of like disliked what they've said about it, but still continue to listen to their music or read their stuff, whatever.
Like you, this is, I think, the only one I've read. I've read half of one of his other ones, and then I lost my copy. And I guess we'll have to see how much it files into his work. I guess one person was saying, I don't think saving grace is the right term, is that there's no racist following of H.P. Lovecraft.
No.
If there was like some sort of like far right wing worship of it, then it's like, okay, now it feels gross.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I don't know if that was a long waffle way of me saying that, like, it kind of just comes down to what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And if you're not, I totally understand.
Mm-hmm.
In H.P. Lovecraft's case, he sort of was the godfather of horror. Him and Edgar Allan Poe changed horror as we know it.
Yeah.
Something I do, here's a little trick, listeners, if you're a bit grossed out by someone but you want to consume their material, like there's a few writers who I'm like, I don't really agree with their politics. I'll always buy them secondhand. I'll refuse to buy it new, so they won't see a penny of it.
That's clever. Nice.
Okay, I thought we'd address that and sort of get on. Like, I basically didn't want to, if we do a run, because he has like 60 shorts out, I didn't want to have to bring it up every time.
Yeah.
Sort of
Yeah.
But if it comes up in the novel, I'm sure we will.
Yeah, address it.
I guess it's super disappointing for H.P. Lovecraft. I've seen enough films and I know enough to know that a lot of his ethos is that cosmos is so big, we're insignificant to the point we don't even know how insignificant we are. And to have that running theme that mankind as a whole is small and insignificant is really sort of counteractive to like racist and anti-Semitic views. It's super disappointing and frustrating that someone can sort of have that wide scope and small thinking at the same time.
Yes. Agree. Okay, so that's the elephant shifted. Shall we break down? I'll give you the synopsis of the story that we're going to talk about a bit more.
Hit it. Your synopsis might be longer than the story.
I've got review roundups and some thoughts. So, Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Dagon is the second story of writer H.P. Lovecraft, written in 1917 and published for the first time in 1919. The work takes its title from the mythological god Dagon and tells a disturbing story. Happened years before to a man with the obsession of suicide. Before throwing himself from the window of his attic, this man writes some notes related to his mental state. Then he began to recall an old story that happened in the years of the First World War. Suddenly, he finds himself a prisoner of a German ship in the Pacific Ocean. After only 5 days, the protagonist manages to escape with a raft. Wandering for days adrift in the sea, one afternoon he finds himself stranded on a disquieting and apparently deserted island. Immediately, he notices that in the mud, a lot of rotting fish are stranded, not unlike himself. And from here, he explores the disquieting landmass only to discover horrors that would push him to the edge and beyond, and will inevitably, in turn, lead him to the window in his attic. Oh, the window, the window. I wrote that last paragraph by myself. That was all me.
So Apocalypse Now. The horror.
Yeah. The horror. Okay. So, we've got Erin coming in with the 4-star. Dagon remains to be one of my favourite Lovecraftian tales to this date. This may be partly due to, and this is debatable, it being that this story is one of the foundations of Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, which was a moniker given to his weirdest coherent stories. It was coined by author August Derleth. Again, there may be other stories that some may argue as being the foundation, but either way, I think Lovecraft fans and fanatics can agree Dagon was possibly one of Lovecraft's earliest examples of writing psychological and cosmic horror. So with a simple plot like that, what makes this story unique and creepy? One of the reasons to this is this story seemed to show us the elaborate language Lovecraft was fond of using and was still attempting to craft well at this time. If you read an earlier story like this of his, like The Alchemist in 1915 or The Beast in the Cave in 1905, you may see that the stories are a bit clunky. Lovecraft didn't just start writing complicated prose overnight. By looking back at his early stories, you'll see a master trying to perfect his work. I believe Dagon is the tale that shows the style he would become good at and use for his later stories. Which I thought was a
very in-depth historical look.
One more. We've got one more positive from a Michael Sabello. Dagon, despite being one of Lovecraft's earliest story, feels on par with his later masterpieces, such as The Shadow over Innsmouth, which apparently this creature reappears in. and at the Mountains of Madness, which most people have probably heard of. Just not nearly as stretched out. It's a tale that touches on one of my greatest fears, the unknown horrors of the sea and the infinite secrets that it holds within itself. Discovering dark secrets and higher beings never meant to be witnessed by human eyes, being driven to madness and suicidal tendencies. Hallucinatory encounters with unfathomable horrors. All of Lovecraftian staples are present here. The prose, the atmosphere is strong, rivaling the effectiveness of his greatest works, that he would go on to write closer to the end of his career.
Nice.
So we're going to shift. Have you got anything you want to jump in before I get
No.
dislikes? Okay, so the dislikes. Milheya tabalusum tisha. Weird and foreboding, this bite-sized story acts as an introduction to Dagon, who appears on a bigger scale in the shadows over Innsmouth. I love the atmosphere and the narrative, as I always do while reading Lovecraft, but the story itself didn't favour me. Not that I was expecting much from these 7 pages, but it turned out to be too basic. Upside, Lovecraft's infamous racism hasn't manifested itself here. Interesting. And then Braden with a 1 star. Oof. This must be prototypical H.P. Lovecraft story that everyone sources their criticisms about his grating ambiguity from. Well, whatever. I'm not going to beat up a 3-page, 100-year-old story. It has some creepy situations and locations for sure. Jananim?
Fair enough.
Jananim, kind of boring. And then Kyle Asbeck Horzongthowski. Hope I didn't butcher your name there. A window into Lovecraft's xenophobia. Definitely would be hard to get lost at sea, but not all that horrific. See someone who looks different than him, someone who does him absolutely no harm at all, I might mention, and he's so afraid he loses his mind.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So that is all I have for the review roundup. Do you know what U-boot stands for?
U-boat? Like a U-boat, like in the Navy?
Yeah.
Oh, what the U stands for?
No,
I guess I don't.
Untersea boat.
Untersea
boat. Untersee boat. Undersea boat.
I did not, Toby. I will say I have a little list of words that I had to Google.
There was a few in here, wasn't there? That was an element I really enjoyed about this, because there were words I've never heard or read before. I was like, whoa, that's a beauty, that is.
What was the one? There was a moon. Hang on, I've got it here, and it's only 6 pages, so I can probably find
Gibbonus.
it. Gibbonus. I had to Google that. That's very specific, like the other side of a waning moon. Right, like one's growing and one's shrinking. And Stygian. Stygian. Basically very, very dark and gloomy. Yes.
Some great words in here. And there was a part I read early on in this book that just so that readers know, I have the H.P. Lovecraft new annotated H.P. Lovecraft
You've got a
book.
beast.
So it's a beautiful
giant
piece
coffee table book.
It's wonderful. And I was reading some of that. And he deliberately, obtusely almost, used words that were dead.
Oh, so they were dead in his
writings.
Time.
Yeah.
Because now we're reading it 100 years later. It's like, that was a weird language they used then. But even then, he was trying to not date it, but shift it. Interesting.
Yeah, very, very clever. There is a section in the story where he refers to being captured by the German U-boat. And there's a line in it that says, the Great War was at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. Which I thought was really interesting, and refers to the narrator here refers to the shift in German policy regarding attacks by submarine or undersea boats, U-boat. Initially, German commanders observed the historical prize rules governing the capture of any enemy civilian ships and their crew and passengers. So if you captured a ship, or you would capture a ship, and then you would take their people on board and look after them almost.
Oh, this is World War One, right?
Well, yeah, the Great War.
It was a weirdly gentlemanly war. Huh? There was like caring prisoners, I believe.
And to prize rules governing the capture of enemy civilian ships and their crew and passengers. Internationally agreed upon protocol dating from the previous century. So this is something that was in place before the Great War started.
Okay.
But then, however, on October 20th, 1914, the German U-17 sank the SSS Giltra, a merchant ship off Norway. And on February 4th, 1915, the Kaiser declared the waters surrounding England and Ireland to be a war zone. Thereafter, U-boat captains were permitted to sink merchant ships and even potentially neutral ones without warning. So there was a fundamental shift in the approach of
the rules
POWs
changed.
and everything. Yeah. And that's what he's referring to in the text.
Oh, okay. I guess it not felt tacked on, but it did sort of have this opening and on the ship. Like it had that double opening almost, right? Like he's in his room.
Yeah.
And he's on drugs and he's running out of drugs.
Yeah.
He's got an escape plan. And then it jumps to like a ship and then he is captured, but it's so brief.
Yeah, it is. It's really brief. It is.
Yes.
It's almost like a sentence.
I guess it sort of sets the scene, but it could easily have been, I fell off a ship. Or I was in my fishing boat and I got lost.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because it is such a short story. It is what 5 pages long in my book. I don't know how long it is for you.
Like 7 or something. Yeah.
It read really quickly but I do like the succinctness of it, the way that he does enough to set up, just give you get the snapshot of the room at the beginning, which is dank, horrible. You get a sense of this is a man at the end of his tether with everything, and he's no way out.
It's a good atmosphere guy.
Yeah, he's trapped by his surroundings and everything, and then you shift to this German U-boat, and you get the sense of what's happening there very quickly, and with a couple of words, you get the idea that there's some camaraderie between the crew and the prisoners, and it's not just all hatred and caved in, locked away in small, dark, dank areas. It's very much sort of like they play cards together or something like that. Share cigarettes, maybe, chat and talk about differences and things, and which enables him to escape on this little sort of raft, almost a boat. And it's then that he finds himself cast adrift at sea for a few days, and then on an island that is, from what I gathered, volcanic. Sounds like a volcanic island that was born.
That's his description, because he's so confused about where it could have come from. But it's so squidgy, I'm not convinced.
Yes,
like isn't volcanic rock just super hard? So I'm not quite convinced. Just like I guess it's not necessarily this is literally a volcano and lava, but as in a volcano pushed it up from the underground, I guess. Yeah,
and brought the sludge and everything with it, kind of. But that ties into what one of those reviews was talking about, is the ambiguity of a lot of Lovecraft writing. I guess it leaves a lot to the imagination.
There was, I think it was a YouTube review. I think after I read it during work, there's so many iterations of this in like audiobook format, just 10 minutes long. So I listened to a couple, and one of the comments was like, well, this just sums up almost the whole of H.P. Lovecraft. Basically, hey dude, you wouldn't believe the shit I've seen.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really good. I did find and I don't know if we'll put a link in the YouTube video and maybe some of the other descriptions where this goes out. But there's a great animated YouTube short of this story.
I think I might have seen that one.
Extremely well done.
Nice. Yeah.
I was very impressed.
So it seems like you really enjoyed this story.
Yeah, no, I did. I thought it was very good. It was, but it was the succinctness of it and just the description and the use of new words that I've never read before. There was a lot to unpick and unpack. I had to go off and do some research, and with the annotated book that I have, it added that extra depth to things that I never thought about. Like he distinctly likes to use a lot of facts and then embellish them with his creative prose. So in the annotated thing, he goes back and looks at records, and there was no recorded landmass created by volcanoes in the Pacific at that time or that period. So that was therefore fictitious in its approach, not based off any legitimacy, I guess. But a lot of his stuff is based off legitimacy. And then,
I see. I guess I was reading somewhere that a lot of this came from a dream. There's a short paragraph where he tries to get out the boat and it's pure sludge and he has to crawl back onto the boat. And I think that specificness was where his dream was from.
Yeah.
I think there was a weird thing where one of his peers called out, like, you can't crawl through sludge. This makes no sense. And he was like, well, that's exactly what the dream was. So trust me, I understand what that is.
Yeah.
I certainly wish, well, I don't know about wish, but this would be a great short to read if I was like feverish. I don't know if you remember when I read, what was one of those King ones, that crime one? That crime one we did, I forget, but I sort of read it when I was sick and it just took on a whole new form. Arguably completely a different story. I think I had to reread. I go, what the hell was I reading? But this seems like a really good one to like get in your head if you're on the right tiredness or weakness. There's a scene I really liked where it was like, it just reminded me of a time that I was hiking solo in Maine. And it's in the early days when I didn't quite know what I was doing. And I just went right off track and ended up deep in the woods. And there's something I talk about here is like, what's more scary, deafening silence or noises? Because that's the only time I could think of where I was just like, oh God, like trying to figure out the map. And like, it wasn't, when you're lost in the woods and you don't know where you are, it's like, it doesn't help if I don't know if I'm above the road or below the road. Because going north means going into like 100 miles of like untouring woods. And the idea of like, I'm going to call for help, but I had to refrain because I was like, I'm not going to hear anything back. This is a really sudden path. And that was the scariest thing, was that like the echoing silence was just suddenly like, okay, keep it together. Don't say anything because the silence is too frightening. Let's just keep your head and try and, you're far from being lost. You're just off path, but the racingness and that the idea that I could scream and I had a really loud whistle, the idea that I could blow that and no one would hear it, just sort of, that was the thing that got in my head. Yeah, it was fine. I had to go through a few brambles, but eventually I was just like, I just walked right onto the path. I was about an hour lost, and then
did you just deviate slightly or just
it was basically day one, and I just saw a phantom path. Right. I was just a bit oblivious to how the trail was and what the right signs were to look for. So so when you're in the woods, it looks like a clearing, so you follow it. Yeah. And I'm quite a big daydreamer, and this was the first day, so I was just, I don't know, I was getting used to it. The pack was super heavy. My legs was like already tired because it was day one and I didn't really train properly. So I just zoned out thinking I was following a path. And then by the time I stopped, this isn't a path, this isn't right. It was just too late. Right. And then you sort of turn around and then
the path is gone.
There's like that realization that there never was a path to track back on. Do you go forward? Do you go back? Yeah. So I really appreciate that. That's the sort of scenes in this story.
And I guess calling out into the silence is only calling in the noises.
Yeah, like what's the more scary? Do you want a response when you're out there?
Exactly.
I get hooked on these little YouTube videos of like spooky things that happen to like people, and there was one where there was like a guy on a BMX and a very
I've seen that.
I say a thing and it's like help, like a little baby voice, help, and it was just like, nope, this feels like a like, yeah. Oh God, I'm feeling chills now. Like this is a weird trap. Who's waiting out here for a cyclist?
Brilliant.
So I did love the tundra of this. I did love the descriptions of the sludgy wasteland with I love the stuff he recognized, like, and he always went for the weird crustaceans and octopi and not your normal, not just, there's a lovely tuna. There's a lovely sunfish. There's like a flounder fish. No, it was all octopi, giant mollusk, and then stuff that's like, that's not even recognizable. I think that's like an extinct creature sticking, like legs sticking out. That was kind of my highlight.
Yeah, as a negative for myself, I did find the reveal of the monolith and the creature that worshipped to its base was, again, that element was too succinct. It was like he climbed the crest of a hill, went down the other side. Oh, there's a big pillar. Oh, Jesus, what's that thing coming towards it? I've never seen anything like that. Turn and run. And it didn't.
It was a giant, though. It was described as almost as big as a whale.
Yes, a cyclopedian is what they're recalled, which is, I think, harks back to sort of buildings in Rome and Greece.
Yeah,
and
was
like
it Polymus or something? Which is like Poseidon's son, who was a cyclops and who wasn't fishy, but I guess it was a size scale thing. I don't know.
What do you know about Dagon, though?
Not too much. There's a lot of historical stuff I read about, but it goes back to sort of was it Israeli paganism?
Yes,
like early. Was he the god
Gaza.
of fertility in some cultures?
Right.
I didn't want to get myself into it because I was like, I don't want to get it wrong. And I guess it's one of those things where like there's like when we did Song of Kali, there's kind of variations that go back and almost splinter off in different directions, if you will.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, Polyphemion, the son of Poseidon, the sea god, was one of the Cyclops who lived in Sicily. He was an enormous giant with only one eye and in the middle of his forehead. When Ulysses landed on the island, this monster made him and 12 of his crew captives. 6 of them he ate, and then Ulysses contrived to blind him and make good his escape with the rest of the crew.
Nice. I guess you've got one big target in the middle of his forehead.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. There's somebody called Brewer. I don't know who Brewer is, but he's a writer, I guess. Brewer mentions Dagon as the idol of the Philistines, half woman, half fish. That's on page 325. Milton's Paradise Lost book refers to this god as well. Dagon, his name, sea monster, upward man, and downward fish, yet had his temple high, reared in Astos, dreaded through the coast of Palestine, in Gaeth and Ascalon, and Acheron, and the Garther's frontier boundaries.
It goes back in real history. So again, based on everything and something.
Exactly, which then taps into that whole, the racist and, like I was saying, praying to the monoliths and
like coming across like a tribal of people and just being freaked out by it or something.
So it's that was my only negative about it, was that sort of the build up to the climax was over very, very quickly, and he just almost saw it and ran away.
I guess he just grabbed himself, and then I guess
it's a short story, so
I guess at first I was like, he just woke up saved, but I guess he talks about like he can hear thunder coming, so I guess it's to say there might be a tide coming, like a little hint or something.
Storm that drifts the boat.
There was some really cool paragraphs. You want to read one out?
Yeah, go for it.
I find it in the book, but maybe that's more harder. My handwriting's scrappy. Perhaps I should not hope to convey mere words. Okay, I'm going to go for my handwriting, so I think it's staggery. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the uncomfortable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneousness of the landscape oppressed me with nauseating fear. I just realized I was supposed to read that out when I was talking about being lost in the silence.
It's a great. It's a very good use of a collection of words to create an atmosphere in an environment in an original way, I would say.
It's quite good at describing nothing.
Yeah.
Because I think I said this to you before. If you go to like, what does Dagon look like? People are really clear. People really have a sense. I don't know if your book is illustrated and it has some clear pictures of him.
There are some good cover pictures and stuff like that.
It's quite a sparse description for people to be as confident as they are. It's true. He pops up this is one of the Cthulhu Marvel Universe building. There's a set where all the gods are sort of linked in some form and they get mentioned. But I'm always surprised, a lot of his monsters are very clearly defined imagely, and I guess it reminded me of like the Metamorphosis, where are you did he go out of his way to keep it obscure? A lot of his, I feel like we're going to get a lot of the moral of the story is to look upon is to go mad. Like you cannot comprehend these gods from another cosmic being.
Yeah.
I guess you've seen the movie Color Out of Space.
Mm-hmm.
Like they actually have. Turns out that color is purple, but I think within the book, it's the idea that there's a color that we can't comprehend or something.
Yeah. It gives you enough to unsettle you, but not enough to steal away that unsettledness. He creates the unsettledness and lets your mind fill in the rest, which is probably the best way to do horror. And to take it back to our favorite author, King, he often talks about what is behind the closed door is more scarier than what is revealed when you open the door.
Yeah, I guess I read a lot of reviews saying that King was clearly inspired for Pennywise by H.P. The cosmic, you can't really comprehend what it looks like. It has to take form that you can comprehend. The deadlights, it's sort of spoilers for it, but it's almost as old as this bloody book.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I don't know. I guess I don't read too much cosmic horror, or I didn't, and you're not really sure what a genre is. So you actually
what is cosmic horror then? Describe cosmic horror.
I mean, I guess this, right? Like it's sort of space related.
Okay.
Which I guess this particular one arguably sort of isn't, but I think we're going to get onto that.
So unseen environment or unseen areas, unexplored areas, stuff that's.
Yeah, I guess I think like when we talked about cozy mysteries, there probably are some like bullet points of like they sort of point out the insignificance of man. Like we think we're the big shit, but actually there are giant monsters out there that like they can't even see. We're ants to them.
So rather than looking up into space, we're looking down to the seabed, in essence.
I guess in this one, specifically, I guess especially
largely unexplored area.
Mm-hmm. Just like the larger universe is bigger and more frightening than we ever realized.
Okay. Interesting.
I guess there was one line that spiked out at me. Like, what are you talking about? When he was doing his 5-day hike to get up the thing, and he said, "I know not why my dreams were so wild this night." And I'm thinking, really?
Yeah.
You just sort of got captured by Germans, escaped in a rowboat. He spent about 4 days in the boat before he got on there.
Being
hiked
beaten
for
by the
about
sun.
a week into the sludgy unknown. I would say I do know why his dreams were wild, personally. That's my old nitpicking ways.
Completely.
I won't get onto that. I quite dig this. It's. I always wonder, like, if it was longer, would I have liked it? But then something more would have had to happen.
Definitely.
Do you see the climax as seeing Dagon and him basically shitting his pants and doing a runner, or the then almost twist that we sort of forget that he's talking from like a halfway house hospital, and that it's just driven him insane.
This addiction.
Like he's literally had to take to like morphine and hard drugs just to get through the day. And do you seeing stuff come through the door? Because I don't really think Dagon was after him through the door.
No, I definitely don't think Dagon. But I don't. It almost alludes to the fact that maybe Dagon and all of his experiences were never real in the first place anyway, and it is all a fevered dream.
It's true. He was adrift at sea. I guess there's a nice bit where who did he speak to? Like an expert in and he says his thinking was so standard, like he couldn't comprehend. Like he basically saw it as like, I guess if we were to speak of the Greek gods, like he's analysed the literature, but he can't comprehend it as more than literature. Something like that for sure.
Yeah. So where do you stand? Would you say that this man experienced this, or do you think?
I'm going to say I'm going to go with from what I know of Lovecraft and I've seen, that it's all like it's what they've seen has driven them mad. I guess just because I know what it's sort of cheating, but because I know what the writers like thematically. Yeah, it's not about it was in his mind all along. I guess that's the catch of being driven mad and no one believing him. Yeah. But it's certainly that layering of you never quite know, like the end of a Christopher Nolan movie.
That in itself actually is quite a terrifying idea because being the sole person to witness something quite extraordinary and terrifying. Because again, he takes it as far as the narrator wishing that society is destroyed by these underwater creatures, and that the landmass rises up and takes over the land and sinks it into the ocean and replaces it. And these godlike creatures, half fish, half man, destroy humanity just to prove him right, because he's gone that far. He's seen something so horrific, and everyone he talks to is either dismissive or puts it down to morphine addiction, or a crazed man, and it's that in itself is driving him crazy. That must be quite a terrifying thing to have to go through, and it fully explains why he is about to jump out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot comprehend genuinely questioning my own sanity. I read a terrifying story about, is it Ben Fogle, the sort of British, like go live and drink, sitting in nettle tea. Basically, I think it was him. Had his drink spiked with acid in a bar once,
right?
And not knowing, he just instantly thought he was just going insane. Where like acid is a very strong like psychedelic, so he just said he was out, and he thought he just lost his mind in the space of like half an hour.
Wow.
And it's that, you know, how do you officially have to tell someone? You have to ride that trip out, and he just said it's one of the worst experiences ever. Can't comprehend. I think acid lasts potentially a very long time, like
about
7
hours.
8 hours or something. And that point where you realize you're tripping is normally just the start. And if you've taken it, you can sort of, you know, take a breath and say, oh yeah, I took some hallucinogenics. I meant to feel like this. This is a ride I got on, and it will come to an end. If you did that unwillingly and no one officially says, oh yeah, I spiked your drink, and you're told like days after or from a hospital, I cannot imagine the terror
that would stick with you, wouldn't it?
Of just tripping balls like that out of
that would give you weird dreams for years to come.
It would take a recovery, and certainly I don't know, like it's just, I don't know, what a shit thing to do to someone.
Yes, completely agree. So I did enjoy this story. I would give it a 3.5 stars out of 5.
It fits the length. Like I don't know if I already said this or I cut myself off, but I'm never sure. Like, did I want this to be longer, or was it the good length? I guess the thing is, it's HP, so we can't. Like, the reason I picked this one is because it's one of his shortest. I thought we would work in short length up. So if I'm saying, oh, I like it, but it could have been longer, it's like, well, there's lots of this, and they do get longer. So rate this on its own merit and length, I guess.
Indeed. So as an introduction, grand.
I was a little worried maybe it was like that hokey and boring. Like you've read some, not historical books, but like the oldie time stories. I'm never sure if it's like, you know what I mean? Like, let's do Pride and Prejudice. Like, okay, I appreciate the story, but it doesn't mean it's not dull for me to read now. So I had no idea where you were going to come in.
Definitely. I'm not averse to reading.
The classics, I guess.
1914. Quite a long way back, damn it, bloody hell.
I guess I was saying, you know, he's the godfather of horror, but then he's quite clear on what his influences were. You grew up on Grimm's fairy tales, and I think Poe at one point. At one point, someone somewhere says he starts imitating Poe because he really got into him, and you can feel his writing change. We'll have to see if we're succinct enough to pick up on that, but it's been a long time since I read Poe. I guess he starts going English. I don't know.
One other caveat is a lot of people say that he uses, you know, the same thing that they label King with, of taking other people's text and using that to describe elements of his own story. It alludes to that in this annotated book.
But when he says, oh my God, it's just like that Greek book. It's just like that Greek thing I saw from the Greek text. Go and read that for details. I'm moving on with the story.
It's he does. There is elements of that, and it's going to be interesting to see how prevalent that comes furthermore in his stories, or whether it drifts off and becomes less the more seasoned a writer he becomes. So that would be interesting element.
Like you said, this was one of his early short stories. I guess it's probably to say he did not enjoy success in his own lifetime. I don't think it was until the 70s there was resurgence. And it was lucky stuff was recorded. I guess in reading about him, he grew up pretty isolated. He was quite a paranoid. He grew up very isolated. He didn't drop out of school, but he stopped going to school. I guess he was homeschooled. I guess you can feel that in his writing. I guess that's sort of where a lot of his sort of xenophobia sort of comes from.
Yes,
like a lot of
does.
fear of things he doesn't know and understand and that are new to him.
Mm-hmm. That is alluded to again in some of this, but maybe we'll touch on that a bit more in further stories.
Where are you, listener, on Dagon? Check it out.
Dagon.
I did it. I did the thing. I did the thing I said I wouldn't.
Yeah, check it out. Let us know. Yeah, exactly. Be good to know. What have you got any preferences on Lovecraft short stories? Which one that you think is really like the creme de la creme?
I'm gonna guess I know his most famous ones. I would say if we did a poll, it's gonna come out like Call of Cthulhu, Shadow over Innsmouth, and Mountain of Madness.
Right,
seem to be the ones that sort of like. It might just be because they're the most close to a novel. I don't think he ever wrote a full length, and I think they might just be his most like novella, closest thing to like a full story you can sink into.
Okay. I'd never heard of Innsmouth before.
Oh, okay.
That was the first time. This was the first time I've ever heard of that one. Mountain of Madness and Call of Cthulhu I've heard of.
I mean, the amount we've seen in movies where just the imagery. We were talking about that. What's that movie with the Twilight girl, Kirsten Stewart, and it's all underwater? I think it's called Underwater. That basically just has Cthulhu at the end, which I thought was a super nice treat. I don't think I've seen a big budget rendering of Cthulhu in modern cinema.
Okay.
You get it in a lot of hokey movies.
Yeah.
A lot of B horror movies, which is always fun, but it's nice to see something just genuinely rendered and terrifying rather than fun and a bit puppeted. More on that when we get to Cthulhu.
Yes, indeed.
Toby, it's been a blast. Listener, I hope you've had fun. Hey, I'm going to wrap it up around there. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Join us again next episode, and until then, support your local bookstores and have a great day. Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess that, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk into their late degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal indeed was the disciple of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat, with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and the stars that I was somewhere south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coast was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of the unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awakened, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished,
for there in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing within sight save the vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness, of the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from the sky, which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty. As though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet, as I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had laid hidden under the unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me, that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed to dry sufficiently for travelling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odour of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with the graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for the unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation from the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled towards the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening I attained a base of the mound which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface, too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere and waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain. I was awake in cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. With the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a great source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into the fathomless chaos of eternal night. Though my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness, as the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for the descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became gradual. Urged on by my impulse, which I cannot definitely analyse, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by the vast singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I assured myself, but I was conscious of a distant impression, that its contour and position were not altogether a work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express, but despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawed at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps and hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that the far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which were unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I observed on the ocean rise plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on the account of their enormous size were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shewn, disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage to some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but larger than itself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Nathaniel man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into the past, beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing while the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters, vast, polyphemus-like, and loathsome. It darted like a stupendous monster of nightmare to the monolith about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, and while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds, I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and the tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of an American ship which had picked up my boat mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon such a thing. I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has only given transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information of the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but never does there come before me a hideous vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering in the nameless thing that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping the ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likeness on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remains of a puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink, and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear the noise of the door, as if some immense god, slippery body, lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, the hand, the window, the window!